Welcome to the WalterFootball.com podcast. This is episode 285. We're doing our 2020 NFL season previews for the AFC West and NFC West. Joined once again by Jacob Kamaker. Jacob, how are you?
I'm good. I'm realizing I should be in all my Chiefs garb today because we're doing the NFC and AFC West, as you said, but I totally slipped my mind that the Chiefs play in the West. So you're going to have to deal with me wearing yellow, which I don't even know if there's a team that's primary color is yellow. So I'm trying to stay neutral today. That's what I'm doing.
Well, we got the Rams at least, so it's kind of like a secondary color. The Chargers too, so I think you're covered a little bit. So with two of the 8 teams. So before we begin, I should say please hit subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, or share this video, or hit the notification button, or like this video. All those things would be great, especially hitting subscribe. That would mean a lot to us. So anyway, let's cover the AFC West first because that's where the Super Bowl champion is. The Chiefs coming off the Super Bowl. There hasn't been a repeat winner since the 03-04 season when the Patriots did it. So what do you think the chances are the Chiefs do it again?
I think the Chiefs are in pretty good shape to at least make a run at it, because if you look at the AFC as a whole, it's not very stacked. I mean, the Patriots don't have Tom Brady, so they're a question mark for the first time in 20 years. And the Ravens were great last year, but they've had some offseason losses on the offensive line that could impact Lamar Jackson. He may have to run a little bit more, which, I mean, he can do as well as anyone. But if you take away that running, will he be able to sit in the pocket and do well? You don't know. And then, I like the Colts. I know you do too, but there's no clear-cut challenger to the Chiefs. You'd have to find a defense that can really contain Patrick Mahomes, and right now that doesn't exist. So, and if not a defense that can contain Mahomes, an offense that can go toe-to-toe with him. And that also doesn't really exist right now. So Mahomes alone makes the Chiefs probably the biggest threat in the AFC. But if you look at what he has just in terms of offensive weaponry, that gives him a little bit of a boost. And I think the defense is a little bit underrated too. I don't love their secondary, at least at the corner position, especially since they lost Kendall Fuller. But Charvarius Ward played well at times last year. And I think their pass rush is good with Frank Clark and Chris Jones and all them up front. So I think the Chiefs are poised to have another really strong season, and they should push for a Super Bowl. They just kind of have everything going for them, and they don't have any real glaring weaknesses, at least not ones that Mahomes can't overcome.
Yeah, something I like about them a lot, especially in this offseason where players can't really interact with each other like that well as normal, is that they have most of their team returning. Most of their core players will be back. You mentioned Kendall Fuller. He's really the only player of significance who's not going to be around. So I like the Chiefs a lot for that reason. And I think that's going to be a big thing. Continuity in this offseason is going to be huge. But yeah, I mean, Patrick Mahomes is the ultimate weapon right now. He's the best quarterback in the NFL. We thought he was going to lose Sammy Watkins this offseason. That didn't happen. There was some speculation DeMarcus Robinson would be traded. That didn't happen. Chris Jones, there's some trade rumors out there that he was going to be dealt. That didn't happen. I mean, everyone's coming back. Andy Reid is one of the best coaches in the NFL. I expect him to get the most out of his team once again. And I think there's a good chance this team repeats. I usually don't like predicting a team to repeat. I very seldom do it in my season previews. But I have to say my Super Bowl winner isn't out yet, but I'm strongly leaning toward the Chiefs.
Yeah, there's really no reason to expect them to be less competitive. I guess the one thing you could possibly harp on as a reason maybe not to trust them, I don't think they have particularly great depth on the offensive line. I know they drafted Lucas Niang, who has a lot of upside at tackle, but he's far from a proven thing. And Mike Remmers is probably that versatile super sub veteran that they'll use. But I think if they have a couple injuries up front, they could really be in trouble. But even still, so long as they have Patrick Mahomes and he doesn't go down, they're going to be competitive. And we've seen teams in the past, especially more recently, make moves near the trade deadline in the NFL, which wasn't really a thing 10 plus years ago, but has become more of a thing now. So if they find they have a weakness in the secondary, or maybe say there's a linebacker available that they feel can make a difference for them, they can go out and get them, build around this team now, try to win now as much as they can before Mahomes signs the massive extension that he's due, and just really really target another Lombardi. So I think it's fair to assume that they're going to have a good chance to repeat. Like there's nothing really to dislike about this team. Like you said, there's been minimal offseason losses, and I really think the only weakness is the cornerback position.
Yeah, I think. Well, first of all, I can't even imagine what Mahomes' contract is going to be like. It's going to be absurd. It's going to be ridiculous. Anyway, with the offensive line, they had offensive line injuries last year that they overcame. Eric Fisher was out weeks 3 through 10. Andrew Wiley missed 6 through 8, and then Laurent Duvernay Tardif, Dr. Duvernay Tardif missed weeks 9 through 10. And yet this team was still competitive with Mahomes missing 2.5 games, Tyreek Hill missing about 4 weeks or so. This team was still great. And I know they really took off in the second half of the year, but they were still in position to make that run in the second half. So yeah, like I said, it wouldn't surprise me at all if they won the Super Bowl again. But if let's just say if Mahomes goes down for half the season or longer, like worst case scenario, which of the other teams in this division, like who would you say is the favorite to win otherwise?
That's a good question. I think my gut is telling me that it would probably be Denver, because I think that they have a really well-balanced team, and I think they have more upside than the Raiders, who would probably be my second pick, just because Drew Lock, we only saw him in 4 games last year, but he immensely improved from the preseason to his regular season action. And I think he could really take the leap if he continues to improve on his game. I really like what he has and what the Broncos have done this offseason to build around him.
I agree. The Broncos had a lot of bad luck last year. They were 7-9 in weeks 2 and 4. They lost on the last drive due to like bogus Von Miller roughing the passer penalties. And then they had a game in week 11 in Minnesota, and they were up, I believe it was like 23-3 or something like that. They blew the lead to Minnesota. Minnesota came back. That was with Brandon Allen playing quarterback. Like that wasn't even Drew Lock. So this team could have easily had 3 more wins and finished 10-6 last year. Now they add, obviously in the draft, they get Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler. So like a lot of people made big waves about that. And I love the Jeudy pick. Not sure if Hamler can contribute right away, but I think down the road he can. But Jeudy should definitely improve the offense, like no doubt. But I like some of the moves they made otherwise. I mean, they signed Graham Glasgow, who should improve the offensive line. Then they traded for Jarrell Casey, which I thought was crazy. Casey's, he's not the elite player he once was, but he's still great. He should definitely improve the defensive line. And I think, with Chubb and Von Miller on the outside, you have Casey in the middle. Like I think this defense can still be great, especially with AJ Bouye playing corner now. The one concern I have with Denver is their offensive line. Garrett Bowles is a penalty machine. And then you have Jawan James at right tackle, who barely played at all last year. If James can stay healthy, I don't really trust Bowles to improve, but if James can stay healthy, I think Denver should make the playoffs.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with the offensive line being the biggest area for improvement. I did like the Glasgow signing. I also like their draft pick of Lloyd Cushenberry III. I think he's a good option at the center position, or at least give some competition on that offensive line. I also was a fan of the Albert Okwuegbunam pick in the 4th round. I think like that has a chance to really pan out because Okwuegbunam's ceiling is just so high. He was probably the best overall tight end in terms of talent and receiving talent in this class, but injury and maturity issues, I think, dropped him to the 4th round. But if you pair him with Noah Fant and Jeff Hireman, who I am a big fan of, I just like him as a solid backup tight end. Like he's one of those guys who's not anything really that special, but I happen to like him. I think the tight end core that Denver has is pretty solid. Now they're not hoarding as many tight ends as Chicago or Seattle is, but they're pretty close, pretty high up there with the guys they have on their roster. And I think Casey's addition to the defensive line, like you said, is huge too. They were kind of underrated in that area, at least in terms of the interior defensive line options they have, because Mike Purcell and Shelby Harris are 2 solid players. They're nothing special, but you add a guy like Casey who has been a proven pass rushing talent to those guys who are pretty good against the run, and add in Miller and Chubb on the outside. It's gonna be fun to watch, and it should be pretty good. Now, again, the concern I have with the Broncos is probably, aside from their offensive line, the secondary, just because their cornerback position. I like AJ Bouye. I don't think he's worth the contract he has, but he's a good player. It's the position across from him I'm worried about. I think Isaac Yiadom and Michael Ojemudia are going to kind of challenge for that spot on the outside number 2 corner with Bryce Callahan playing the slot if he can stay healthy. He couldn't last year. So I think that's going to be an interesting position battle to watch because Yiadom had some trouble there last year, and that's coming from me, and I'm a BC Eagles fan. So it's hard for me to go against guys that went there, but he hasn't been great. So we'll see if they can find a player there, and if Bouye can continue to play well and doesn't regress. But if they can just find a way to succeed in the secondary, I think they should make the playoffs, like you said.
I like their safeties though, so I think that's nice for them. If Bouye doesn't regress, I think they're going to be fine. I agree that their secondary is not ideal; like they need upgrades at corner. But I think if you have a great pass rush, you can kind of negate that a little bit. I remember the Steelers won the Super Bowl back in 2006, and one of the reasons why I didn't think they would do it is because I didn't trust their offensive line at all. Or is it 05? They won in 05. Right. Yeah. So I didn't like their offensive line at all. But I thought that, or I didn't like the secondary at all, but I thought that their pass rush really made up for that, and it really helped them win the Super Bowl. So I think you can get away with like 1 weak corner, I guess, or with the slot. Yeah, like you have 2 weak corners, but they have one solid one. They have good safeties. They have a great pass rush. So I think that the Broncos can make the playoffs. I don't expect them to win the Super Bowl or anything, but I think that they can get there. So we have a comment here. It says, as a Chiefs fan, I think the Chargers, he likes the Chargers as the alternate in the AFC West. What do you think about the Chargers?
Yeah, I'm not sold on the Chargers. I don't dislike their roster, and I think they've made some good moves this offseason between signing Brian Bulaga, adding Kenneth Murray in the draft, signing Chris Harris away from the Denver Broncos. I think that was a really good get for them, even though Harris is on the older side. But with the Chargers, it all boils down to quarterback. And the options you have currently are Tyrod Taylor, who was so bad for the Browns in 2018 that he couldn't even make it through 3 games as a starter. And in his last start for the Browns, he completed 4 of 14 passes for 19 yards. I was researching this yesterday, and it was unfathomably bad. And I like Taylor. He's a solid backup, but I don't think he can make it through the full season as a starter for a winning team. And then you have Justin Herbert, who was the number 6 overall pick, but he's pretty raw. He's going to need some time to develop. So I think with those 2 guys at quarterback, you're not looking at a winning team in 2020 unless there's some massive surprise, unless Taylor is somehow way more accurate than he was in seasons past. And his downfield throwing ability is a massive question. And then the only other option would be Herbert really progressing fast, much faster than anyone expects. And, they have the weapons needed for that to potentially happen between Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Hunter Henry, if he can stay healthy. But I just don't trust the quarterback situation, so I can't trust the Chargers right now.
I like the Chargers roster overall, though. They added to their offensive line. They got Brian Bulaga, and they traded for Trey Turner. 2 solid upgrades in the offensive line, which is a big issue. They still have issues at right tackle and one of the guard spots. And center Mike Pouncey is good if he's healthy, but he's never healthy. So, once he goes down, they're going to have 3 issues on the offensive line. It's still going to be better than it was last year, but it's going to be a problem. You mentioned Hunter Henry staying healthy. That's not going to happen. Let's face it. Anyway, but their defense is awesome though. Like the Joey Bosa and Melvin Ingram on the outside. They're just great. They're 2 of the probably one of the best pass rushing tandems in the NFL. And their secondary didn't have Derwin James for most of last year, and getting Derwin James back for the entire season is going to be huge, I think. And they added Chris Harris to help their secondary. Their one weakness on defense last year was stopping the run. They were just gashed against the run against rush-heavy teams last year. But they signed Linval Joseph away from the Vikings, who's going to be a big run plugger. They drafted Kenneth Murray. He'll help too. So I think the Chargers have one of the better defenses in the NFL. The problem is what you said. It's quarterback. Like Tyrod Taylor, I agree. He's a good backup. But to count on him as a starter, he can win a game here and there if he's carried by his teammates. But, for him to get to the playoffs, I think that's a very tall order, even with the defense he has. So we'll see what happens with Justin Herbert. How soon do you think Justin Herbert's going to start? But just, off the top of your head.
I think he has to start this year unless the team brings in like Cam Newton or someone instead of Taylor to really give him that full year. But I would assume that Taylor makes it through at most 8 starts, but I think the 6 start mark is where we're going to start seeing like okay, it's time to put Herbert in. And, Anthony Lynn's seat may get a little bit hotter. I don't think he's like on the hot seat or anything, but say Taylor struggles really badly, but their defense plays well. Then we may see Justin Herbert thrown into the fire. I could kind of see this being a little like the Dwayne Haskins situation in Washington last year. The one difference being that Herbert's supporting cast and team is significantly better than what Haskins was dealing with in Washington. But I think Herbert will come in, not quite be ready, but I think he could still find some success towards the end of the season. But I think it's going to be a rocky road when he comes in. I'm going to say he makes 10 starts as a rookie.
Okay. I was looking at their schedule. I think there are a couple of spots that make sense. One, obviously, after the bye. So their bye is week 10. So, week 11 makes sense for him to make his first start. But I'm looking at this like couple of easy opponents that, they give him the first start. They have Jacksonville at home week 8. Like, why not just put in Justin Herbert? It's a very easy matchup. I think that makes a lot of sense. And another one, if Tyrod Taylor is terrible, let's just say he loses to the Bengals, which is, given that they had the worst record last year, it might be embarrassing. Then week 2, they have the Chiefs who could just blow them out. If it's that ugly, in week 3, they play the Panthers at home. And I think Justin Herbert could start as early as week 3. I think you're probably right. I think it's probably going to be closer to October, November-ish. But it wouldn't surprise me if they pull the plug early on Taylor. Yeah,
it could. We could see very what happening in Cleveland, where the plan was to sit Baker Mayfield as long as possible and try to win with Taylor. And Taylor was just so bad against the Jets in week 3 that they pulled him at the half, put in Mayfield, and won the game. And then it was never questioned beyond that. You could see that happen against the Panthers. If they get blown out by the Chiefs, Taylor, I would assume they'd still start Taylor against the Panthers unless things got really bad. But, if they're like losing by 14 at the half to the Panthers, then you got to think all right, it's time to pull the plug on this and just let's see what Herbert can do. But I think that's going to be one of the most interesting storylines to watch in the division, because I think that's going to have a big impact on how the Chargers play and how Herbert develops. The Chargers are, I would say, the most volatile team in the division. I could see them finishing with 4 or 5 wins because of their quarterback situation, or if one of them miraculously pans out, it's possible they could make the playoffs. I won't rule anything out because the rest of their roster outside of the quarterback position is strong, but I just don't think they have quite enough steam to make it now.
Yeah. We have a couple questions. I'll answer them right after we finish this division off. So the last team, the Raiders, I think they're another team that people might think might make a jump. How do you feel about the Raiders this year?
Yeah, I kind of like them. Okay. When I look at them on offense, there's one thing that just stands out to me. It's like this offense just doesn't feel like it's built for Derek Carr to be the quarterback. You got Tyrell Williams and Henry Ruggs are both better downfield threats, but Carr doesn't like to throw the ball deep. So that's kind of a little bit weird. I would have thought they would have gone, instead of Ruggs, going for a better route runner or a bigger catcher. So Jerry Jeudy or CeeDee Lamb. But Ruggs can still make plays off slants, so it's not like he can't do anything. But I feel like Carr is going to be more apt to target Hunter Renfrow in the slot short. Same with Darren Waller and Jason Witten, who they now have too, which is unfathomable to me that he is not on the Cowboys. But I'll take him on the Raiders over him in the broadcast booth. No offense, Jason Witten, but. Yeah, I like the Raiders' run game, though. I think Josh Jacobs is good. I think their offensive line is excellent outside of Colton Miller at left tackle, who still has a ton of upside, but hasn't put it all together yet. I think the big area we're looking at is on defense. What can they do there? We saw them generate better pass rush last year. That had fixed them what was a massive issue for them. Then they invested a ton to improve their linebackers, which was their biggest issue last year. So I think they're moving in the right direction on defense. I think it all comes down to how that secondary gels together. I don't know if they have a true number 1 corner. I think Damon Arnett in the first round was a reach. Trayvon Mullen was okay as a rookie, and it looks like they signed Prince Amukamara, which I had missed. But they have players back there that can get the job done. I'm just interested to see how it all gels. So I like their roster. Again, I think it's the same thing with the Chargers. I like their roster, but I question how far Derek Carr can carry this team with the way the offense is constructed.
Yeah, Derek Carr is, I feel like if the Raiders had a good quarterback, I'd be like, okay, this team could make a really deep push into the playoffs. I don't like Derek Carr that much. He's very subpar. I think that's how you can describe him. He doesn't take shots downfield. Sometimes he will, but he'll often miss open receivers downfield. He'll settle for checkdowns instead, and it's got to be so frustrating. There's a reason why the Raiders made Marcus Mariota the most expensive backup quarterback. I think there's a decent chance Mariota takes over, and it wouldn't surprise me if he has a Ryan Tannehill type run where he's just better than the incumbent. I think that's definitely a possibility. Mariota, he won a playoff game before, which Derek Carr has not done. He's the former number 2 overall pick, higher than Derek Carr was. So Mariota has more talent than Derek Carr, and he has the mobility. Not that the Raiders necessarily need it with their offensive line, which I like a lot. But still, it could help, definitely. I like their defense a lot. They added to their linebacking core, Corey Littleton and Nick Kwiatkowski. I think those are 2 great additions. Malik Collins to the defensive line. If Cleveland Farrell can make a big jump in his second year, along with Max Crosby, they should have a very good pass rush. So that should negate some of the issues that you kind of had concern with in their secondary, and the secondary is probably the weakest area on the defense, but it's not that bad. Like if Arnett plays well as a rookie and Mullen makes an upgrade in his second year, and if Amuka Mara can stay healthy, they'll have a pretty good defense. It's just up to the quarterback. So if Carr does better with a better receiving core, or if Mariota plays well, I could definitely see the Raiders make the playoffs.
Yeah, it's funny. The thing about Mariota that confuses me too, though, is he's another guy that he's not great on deep shots either. Like he's a super accurate quarterback, but I don't think he has the strongest arm, partially due to the elbow injuries he's had in recent year. Maybe if he's healthier and his elbow's in good shape, he'll be able to hit Ruggs downfield if he has to step in for Carr or something along those lines. And I like Mariota too. I think he has bounce back potential, if not with the Raiders, with another franchise down the line. But I will be interested to see how he operates in the offense compared to Derek Carr. But I do like the Raiders. I think they're moving in the right direction under John Gruden. And if they can find a quarterback, or if Derek Carr can make the leap and really become a better downfield passer, which I don't see happening at this point, but you never know. I think they could be a playoff challenger from this division. This division overall, I think, is pretty strong.
I think so too. Who saw Ryan Tannehill leading the Titans to the AFC Championship? So, I guess anything can happen, really. But I agree that this division is very strong. Looking at odds to win the division, the Chiefs are minus 375. This is on 5 dimes. The Broncos are plus 950, and so are the Raiders, and the Chargers are plus 900. Does anything stand out to you there as something that's a good bet?
I probably wouldn't bet against the Chiefs. I wouldn't bet on them at that number either. But if I had to make a value pick, I probably would go with the Broncos at plus 950. I mean, they're tied for the longest odds. I don't understand why the Chargers are ranked ahead of both the Raiders and Broncos, just because of the issues they have at quarterback, like we discussed. I know their roster is strong. But if I were taking a shot on something, I'd probably go Broncos, just on the off chance that Mahomes gets hurt or something. But overall, I think I wouldn't bet this division, because it just feels like the Chiefs should win it. And I don't think that while all of these teams could compete for the title in the future, I don't think they're quite there yet. I think the disparity in quarterback talent is just too high to overcome.
Yeah, I should say the field is plus 320 against the Chiefs. So if you think another team is going to win besides the Chiefs, you have plus 320. But I agree. I think the Chiefs are going to win the division, barring, extensive injuries. Mahomes even got hurt last year for 2.5 games, and they won the division. And they didn't have Tyreek Hill for the first 5 or 6 weeks. And yet they still won. So I do think the Chiefs will win the division. They used to go 11-5 and 12-4 every year before Mahomes, when Alex Smith was there. So I wouldn't bet anything otherwise. So that's it. Let's get to a couple questions before we begin the NFC West. Tony's asking, when does our show typically start? I always say I'm going to send you the link at 6:30 on Tuesday. but sometimes it doesn't happen. Usually you have to take the dogs out or something. Otherwise, they'll ruin the show while we're doing it. Yeah, it's usually around like 6:45 that we start. And how the Texans lost Timmy Jernigan. I believe he didn't pass his physical, which is not a surprise if you're familiar with his injury history. And Melvin Gordon, in PPR, what are your thoughts?
I don't dislike Melvin Gordon, but I think that there is a real possibility of a 50-50 timeshare with Philip Lindsay, because we've seen Philip Lindsay play well. And I know they brought in Gordon, but it's not like they paid him an exorbitant amount of money or a long-term deal. I think Gordon was more about, getting paid what he's worth and getting a chance for revenge on the Chargers. So I think that I would still invest in Gordon, but, in PPR, I probably would target him maybe in that early third round range. You and I have talked about this numerous times. The running backs are really weak this year, so you kind of have to take some guys earlier than you want. But I'm not sure who I'd want more, Gordon or Lindsay. Probably lean Gordon, but depending on what Lindsay's draft value is, he may be the better value. So that whole situation just reeks of something that's going to frustrate me. So I may stay away from it as much as I can.
Yeah, Philip Lindsay's not going away. But yeah, I think third round's right for Melvin Gordon, considering how weak the running back position is this year. And another question about James Conner, same question to PPR. Southern Jet NC is asking if he's going to be in a committee, which, if the Steelers expressed frustration with James Conner for how he played last year, they drafted Anthony McFarland in the 4th round. They still have Benny Snell. They still have other running backs there. So yeah, I think it's going to be a committee. I don't like James Conner in PPR because, they have other receiving running backs.
Yeah, I think Jalen Samuels in PPR would definitely be the pick. I would avoid Connor pretty much at all costs. Like, I just don't see him having a big year, and I think that the Steelers could try to trade for Leonard Fournette if he becomes available, and then maybe Connor becomes trade bait for a team willing to take a chance on him. So, I wouldn't go after Connor in PPR.
Yeah. Johnny Shrubberseed says Derek Carr will be the starter. LOL. Yeah, he will be the starter week 1. Will he be the starter week 17? I don't know. I wouldn't count on it. We'll see. And Tony says Jameis is better than Mariota. Last year, I don't know about that, but now that he's had LASIK, maybe. I think maybe the Raiders, if they see Jameis Winston play well this year, if Breeze gets hurt, then maybe they regret which 2015 quarterback they signed.
Yeah, and I think their logic with going Mariota over Winston is, Mariota's a little bit of a safer player. He doesn't, as a backup, he doesn't take those big chances that result in the 8 points per game off turnovers that the Bucs allowed last season, which was far and away the most in the NFL, at least according to my calculations. So I think that I think they went with Mariota because he's safe, but I think Winston has the higher ceiling, especially if his eyes are right. My dad has been saying, like, the whole offseason, he thinks Winston's in for a big year because of that surgery. And, my dad has one football opinion a year that is usually pretty right. So we'll see if it's that one.
Nice. Yeah. It should help. Hopefully he gets a chance. Although I shouldn't say, because that would mean Drew Brees gets hurt. But, let's just say the Saints are, say Drew Brees misses 2 games or something, and Winston has great games. I could definitely see that. Although I would have loved the comedic value with Jameis Winston and John Gruden. With every interception, John Gruden would just lose his mind, and it would be amazing. Anyway, let's get to the NFC West. The 49ers were representing the conference in the Super Bowl last year, and they almost won. They're on an upstart last year. No one really expected them to get there. I like their chances. I had them going 10-6 in my season previews, and I thought that was optimistic, and yet it was short of what they did. So what do you think the Niners will do this year? Can they get back to the Super Bowl?
I don't think they get back to the Super Bowl. I like their roster overall. I like Jimmy G too. I like his potential in the future, which is weird to say given that he's already been to a Super Bowl and technically has 2 rings as a backup in New England, I believe. But I just don't know if they're going to be as good as last year. I think there may be a little bit of a Super Bowl hangover with them, and they're playing in a relatively tough division. The Seahawks are always tough. The Cardinals are getting better, and every NFC West divisional game is a slog, and it's very difficult. I think they've done a good job of plugging some of their holes. I thought getting Javon Kinlaw to replace DeForest Buckner in trade was smart financial planning by the team because they couldn't afford both Armstead and Buckner. They paid Armstead because he was a little bit cheaper, albeit a little bit less effective. So they still have a strong defensive line. Their defense overall is very strong. Again, concerns for me are at cornerback just because Richard Sherman's getting older and they don't have like a true number 2 across from him. But that's one hole on a very, very strong defense. So as we talked about earlier, it's not something to worry about too much. I think the big thing to keep an eye on is how Trent Williams fares in his first year there. He's replacing Joe Staley, who was a long time solid left tackle for the 49ers. Now, Williams, when healthy and when on the field, is one of the better tackles in the league, but he didn't play last year because of issues with the Washington front office and medical staff. But he now has a chance to play again. If he can't stay healthy, though, the 49ers are going to have to get by with Justin School, Daniel Brunskill, and Colton McKivitz. And, School and Brunskill played well last year when forced into action on the offensive line, but I don't know if that would continue if coaches have more tape on them, if they can find flaws there and pressure Jimmy G. The 49ers may have some trouble. So long story short, I think the 49ers are still going to be very good. I just don't think they're going to be good enough to get back to the Super Bowl. I think they're going to be a little bit limited by Jimmy G, at least unless he makes this big leap forward.
Yeah, he definitely needs to make a big leap because they got a little bit worse, and every team in their division except for the Rams, I think, got a little bit better, or maybe in Arizona's case, got a lot better. I think that there are 3 areas where they got slightly worse this year, and you talked about 2 of them. One was going from Joe Staley to Trent Williams. I know Joe Staley missed a decent amount of action last year, but he was around for the playoff run, and I think that going to Trent Williams, who's obviously a great left tackle, or at least he was in the past, but he hasn't played football in 2 years, so we don't know how well he's going to play. So I think they might be a little bit worse at left tackle this year, maybe not, but we'll see. But going from DeForest Buckner to Javon Kinlaw, which you mentioned as well, Javon Kinlaw has a lot of upside, and wouldn't surprise me if he has a strong rookie year, but he's not going to be as dominant as Buckner was last year. Buckner was playing on a different level. He's one of the best defensive linemen in the NFL, period. Like, it would be shocking to me if Kinlaw plays as well as Buckner did last year. Like, maybe down the road, maybe eventually, but not as a rookie. The other spot, on offense, they went from Emmanuel Sanders to Brandon Ayuk. And Sanders joined the middle of the year. He played well. He gelled right away with Jimmy Garoppolo, but they lost him. Now they have Ayuk, who he's kind of like Kinlaw. Like, he has potential. He might be good down the road, but as a rookie receiver, like, can he do what Sanders did last year? Like, probably not. So they're potentially weaker in these 3 areas. So, given that, and also the fact that 2 of their teams in the division got better, and then you have, we'll get to the Buccaneers next week. The Buccaneers can be better. You still have the Saints. And then, I think it's just tougher competition all around, and they're slightly worse. So they can get back to the Super Bowl, but I wouldn't bet on it.
Yeah, and one other area I think that deserves mentioning as well is the running back position. I know the Shanahans over the course of the years they can take any running back and turn them into a good player. And we saw that with Raheem Mostert last year. He was incredible during the playoffs. But we're looking at them potentially relying on Mostert as a long-term starter. And Mostert has had some injury issues during his career. And, he's never really been the lead back. So they don't have Matt Breida anymore. Tevin Coleman is solid, but he also was injured at times. And then it's Jeff Wilson Jr. and Jerick McKinnon on the depth chart. Like, I have faith that Shanahan will find an answer, but if it takes them any amount of time to find that early in the season, or at least the right balance at running back, it could stunt their offense a little bit, because we've seen Jimmy Garoppolo really rely on the play action game to get the offense going. And in general, they rely on the run game to carry the offense. So if Mostert has any issues out of the gate, that could really slow them down as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think Matt Breida could hurt them. We'll see. But Mostert was amazing in the playoffs. So if that continues, it'll be shocking, because he was a special teamer, like journeyman before that. So it would be cool to see him emerge. Andrew Paul saying Seahawks did not get better this offseason. So let me correct that. The Seahawks traded for Quandre Diggs in the middle of the year last year. Quandre Diggs made a big improvement to the defense. And it's kind of like one of the reasons I'm saying that. The other reason is because Seattle was so banged up at the end of last year. Look at what happened to the running backs. Like, they had no one left. They had to call back Marshawn Lynch, who was just out of shape. They're gonna be healthier. They're gonna have Quandre Diggs for the entire year. I know Jadeveon Clowney's not there right now, but he could come back. We'll see. But I do think I think Seattle will be better this year. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think Seattle's in position to be better. I think one of the big things to look at is the growth of DK Metcalf on offense, because he showed a strong rapport with Russell Wilson. And if he can continue to grow and become like a number one receiver between him, Tyler Lockett, and the like 7 or 8 tight ends the Seahawks have on the roster that could all potentially make the team, I think they're pretty good. As always, the weakness with Seattle is their offensive line. Outside of Dwayne Brown, it's pretty hopeless, in my opinion. BJ Finney was a fine addition as a potential starting center. I like Damian Lewis as a 3rd-round pick from LSU, but Ethan Posick hasn't panned out, and their right tackle is going to be either Brandon Shell or Cedric Ogbuehi, which is if Cedric Ogbuehi starts, it's the equivalent of getting the worst version of Jermaine Ifedi. Both 1st-round tackle picks out of Texas A&M that have not panned out well. So I'll be interested to see what happens there. So that's the one area you could potentially find problems with on offense. But Russell Wilson is like just offensive line proof so far in his career. He doesn't get hurt. He's able to scramble away from pressure and make ridiculous throws. I mean, in my opinion, he's the 2nd best quarterback in the NFL behind Patrick Mahomes. Just his ability to escape pressure and just make perfect throws all the time, despite mostly relying on the run in Pete Carroll's offense. It's pretty impressive in my opinion. So I'm a big Wilson fan. And I think on defense, I think they're kind of underrated, especially in the back 7. Their linebacker group is still very strong. Bobby Wagner is probably the best middle linebacker in the league, or at least one of them. KJ Wright's getting older, but is still strong. And then they spent a 1st-round pick on Jordan Brooks, who I thought was a reach, but he still has a ton of upside and could easily be a great 3rd linebacker there. Secondary, I'm a big Quandre Diggs fan. I've been a fan of him since 2015 when he came out. And I think that Quentin Dunbar's addition, provided that he can avoid jail time for armed robbery charges that he and DeAndre Baker were involved in, which was a whirlwind story for us, who thought the Redskins got robbed in that trade, but it may have been the Seahawks. So we'll see if he gets on the field. But if he does, I think he really solidifies that secondary, and that back 7 looks really strong. The question on this side of the ball, can they rush the passer? If they don't bring back Clowney, it's going to be hard. But they did have LJ Collier, who was a 1st-round pick. He was really bad as a rookie, but who knows? Maybe he just needed a year to develop. I mean, he went to TCU, and Jerry Hughes wasn't very good as a rookie like 10 years ago, and he turned into a pretty good pass rusher. So who knows? I think the Seahawks are still strong, and anytime they have Wilson on the field, you can make the playoffs.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, like you said it perfectly, Wilson's offensive line proof. But for mostly the regular season, like once he gets in the playoffs, he gets into trouble because he has to play elite teams, and then he gets in. It's a shame he doesn't have much help. Like if Russell Wilson had a great offensive line in front of him, the Seahawks will be in position to win the Super Bowl every year. Not that they'd win it every year, but they'd be in the mix to win it every year. But as long as Wilson's healthy and he hasn't missed a start yet in the NFL, the Seahawks will be in position to make the playoffs, and especially with a 3rd wild card team this year, I'd be surprised if the Seahawks don't make it to January. I didn't mention Quentin Dunbar because I'd assume that he's not going to play, but if he does, like that's a huge upgrade for them for sure. Otherwise, I believe that Quentin Dunbar and DeAndre Baker will be prominently featured on the Brink this year. So can't wait for that. They also got Bruce Irvin. So Bruce Irvin's not the same player he once was when he played for Seattle the first time, but he's still solid. Like he can still contribute. And so if they get Clowney back, having Irvin as a 2nd pass rusher should be pretty good. You mentioned BJ Finney. I like that signing. I think that's solid. Last year they had Justin Britt, who has talent, but he couldn't stay healthy. He was always injured. So Finney should be an upgrade by default. If Damian Lewis pans out, like the 3rd-round guard, mid-round guards pan out all the time. And suddenly they have like a great left tackle and like 2 solid interior linemen. Like that's fine. Like that's enough for Russell Wilson to make a deep run into the playoffs.
Yeah, I wish they would sign Larry Warford if he's still available. I can't remember if he is, but I think he was cut by the Saints. I'd like to see him on the team, but
Yeah,
yeah.
right. I mean, there's some solid linemen out there. Like you mentioned, right tackle, which is just atrocious for them. Cordy Glenn's available. Like I know that he has issues staying healthy, but sign him to a 1-year prove-it deal. If he can play 10 games, like I think that's a huge upgrade at right tackle. So
yeah, Calvin Beachum too. And I got one hypothetical scenario question for you.
Okay.
If the Seahawks were to have the Patriots offensive line and the Patriots were to have the Seahawks offensive line, what would the records of each team be?
No Tom Brady now, or
no Tom Brady this year's Patriots? So with Jarrett Stidham.
Well, the Patriots would, assuming Stidham's not like the next Tom Brady. I think the Patriots would be like 2-14, 1-15. It's hard to imagine Bill Belichick having that better of a record, but they really wouldn't score any points. They'd lose every game like 6-0. The Seahawks would, with the Patriots offensive line, I think they'd be the. I don't know if they'd be the best team in the NFC. Maybe they'd be top 2, I think. So yeah, 13-3, 12-4. Yeah.
That was like roughly what I was going to say for both of them. So I was just curious. I just love that hypothetical of take a good offensive line in front of Russell Wilson. Just like something I hope we get to see before he retires.
Yeah, right. Yeah, those Patriot games would be like 3-2, 6-0, like 3-0, 4-3. Like it would be horrible. Anyway, so where do you want to go next? We have the Cardinals and the Rams to talk about.
Why don't we go with the one team that's going to be better of those two? And I think you know which one I'm talking about here.
Yeah, it's not the color you're wearing. So why do you like the Cardinals this year?
I think that they're just poised to make some strides on offense. I was wrong about Kyler Murray. He looked really pro ready. Reminded me a little bit of Russell Wilson. He's a bit more of a runner than Wilson is. But, same type of dynamic arm talent. And you add DeAndre Hopkins to his already strong arsenal of weapons, including Larry Fitzgerald, Christian Kirk, Andy Isabella, who was a second-round pick out of UMass. And then you look at the offensive line, and they should be better because Marcus Gilbert's coming back. DJ Humphries is coming back. If they can stay healthy, Murray should be protected. And even if one goes down, Josh Jones was a good pick in the 3rd round. So I think that their offensive line's looking better. Kenyon Drake is better than David Johnson at this point in their careers because Johnson's too injury prone. And then you just look at the defensive side of the ball. They've added some key players there too. I think Isaiah Simmons, as kind of a jack of all trades, starting at linebacker but move him around the field, is a great fit in Arizona. And I think Vance Joseph will figure out how to use him well. And then I like their talent overall. I think they have a good secondary with Patrick Peterson leading the charge there. If Chandler Jones is a top pass rusher, I think their interior defensive line may be the weaker point of their team with Zach Allen, Jordan Phillips, and Corey Peters as their 3 starters in the 3-4 alignment. But I also really like Zach Allen. I had him as a 1st-round grade at times before the 2019 draft. So I could see him making strides and kind of helping to lock down that position and strengthen the front. I think they still have some holes. They have like one good player at every level of the defense, but they have some holes to fill in. But I think they're growing and they're moving in the right direction, which is the most important thing for the team. And I think they could have a winning record this year. I mean, we saw them give the 49ers trouble last year with less talent. So I think they could beat them once this year, maybe.
Yeah, I have them going 9-7, and I think that's definitely possible. We always see these teams with second-year quarterbacks making a big leap, and I think Kyler Murray could do that. He played very well most of the time as a rookie. He had some struggles, most notably early in the year against Seattle. Like he had a terrible game there. But he was going through growing pains. They had offensive line issues. So the offensive line is a big thing for me. And you talked about how Humphries and Gilbert, they're solid when healthy, but they both have dubious injury histories. Gilbert didn't even play at all last year. So if Gilbert could stay on the field and Humphries continues to stay healthy, which he did last year, I think Arizona has great potential to maybe even exceed 9-7. I think they can potentially finish like 10-6 or 11-5. I think they have that much upside, but they do have a lower floor though with their offensive line, and yeah, on their defense too. Like they Isaiah Simmons will help a lot because they got torched by tight ends every single week last year, which is awful. So he'll help there. But their defensive line is still weak unless Zach Allen can make a big leap. I don't trust their secondary outside of Patrick Peterson, who is probably not the same player he once was. He's getting older. So I think Arizona has plenty of potential. So I'm curious to see how they'll play DeAndre Hopkins with Kyler Murray. Like, that was such a big move to get him a number one receiver, and it'll take a lot of pressure off Murray. There will be fewer people in the box. Kenny Drake will have more room. Kyler Murray will have more room to scramble. So I like the direction this team's going. I just hope their offensive line can stay on the field.
Yeah, I think that's the big key for them, because if they lose Marcus Gilbert or DJ Humphries or even one of their interior offensive linemen, they don't have a ton of depth outside of Josh Jones, who, while I like him, still needs work to be ready to produce at the NFL level. So we'll see what they can ultimately do there. But I think the offensive weaponry is there, and I think the defense is being built properly. And while Vance Joseph was not a good head coach, I think he's a fantastic defensive coordinator. So I think they're in good hands as long as he's there. And I have to say, I have to commend Cliff Kingsbury. I was dead wrong about their decision to draft Kyler Murray and trade Josh Rosen. It looks brilliant in hindsight. And at the time I was like, this is a terrible idea. They should have done something else. But I guess it's a new strategy you can do in the NFL. If a guy is a real mega bust after 1 year, just cut bait now.
Yeah, it's something they couldn't have done 10 years ago when they had that insane contract scaling for quarterbacks. There's no way they could have given up on Josh Rosen after year one, which is why it's never happened before where teams drafted a quarterback back to back. It happened once. I think Denver traded the quarterback they drafted, or maybe it was someone else. But yeah, they traded the quarterback they drafted the second year. So that couldn't happen back then, but it can happen now. So I guess that's good. That's a good thing. I just hope that teams don't give up on a quarterback too early. So we'll see what happens. So let's get to the Rams. And I just figured out that with your yellow shirt and my blue shirt, it's kind of exactly what the Rams color scheme is. So I think we kind of nailed it there. All right, what do you think about the Rams, Jim?
I think the Rams are very overrated. And it's funny too, because you look at this team and they were in the Super Bowl like not very long ago at all. Like a year and a half ago, they were playing in the Super Bowl against the Patriots. And, if either team could have done anything on offense, the Rams could have had a chance to win. But lo and behold, we had to endure that Super Bowl. And I say that as a Patriots fan. That was such a bad Super Bowl. But anyway, if you look at the Rams, their offense, there are so many questions. You have Jared Goff is fine when he's supported well, but I don't think he's going to be supported well outside of his receivers. I love Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. I love Van Jefferson as a second-round pick. I think he's going to be excellent as a third receiver, and Josh Reynolds is good too. But the team doesn't have much talent on the offensive line. Their best lineman is Andrew Whitworth, who I believe is 38 now, and he will turn 39 in December. So, I don't know how much he has left in the tank. He wasn't as good last year as he's been in years past. And the rest of their line is pretty much, they don't have anyone who's that great. Rob Havenstein was a second-round pick in 2015. He's had some good years, but wasn't as good last year. And the interior is made up of a bunch of young guys who are recent draft picks or recent trades by the Rams, but none have really stood out so far. So I'm having trouble trusting them to block for Goff, keep him clean, and give him a chance to produce. And then the running back position, I like Cam Akers as a second-round pick, but he's not proven, and he has to run behind a bad offensive line. So I think that unless he can really overcome that, the Rams may be a little bit weak on the offensive side of the ball. And then on defense, they lost Wade Phillips, which is huge because he's had an immeasurable impact on that defense. Before he came in, they were a solid defense, and then he turned them into an excellent defense. Now you look at them and they have a solid front of Aaron Donald, Michael Brockers. Ashawn Robinson was a good free agent signing. But aside from those guys and Jalen Ramsey and John Johnson and Taylor Rapp in the secondary, it's not all that strong at linebacker. It's not all that strong on the edge. So I think unless they can find some playmakers there to make up for the loss of Corey Littleton, and I think Clay Matthews was on the team last year. Not that he was any great shakes, but Dante Fowler is who I'm trying to think of. They need to make up for those losses. If they can't do it, I think the defense regresses, especially without Phillips in the fold.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned Michael Brockers, who's usually a great player, but the Ravens didn't want to sign him because of he didn't really pass their physicals. So, maybe he takes a step back this year if he's not healthy. So that's another reason to be bearish on the Rams. I think the Wade Phillips loss is huge. Some of the players you mentioned, like Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, they won't be affected by that. Like, they're great players. But some of the other players who performed well for the Rams, like John Johnson, Taylor Rapp. Obviously had Dante Fowler last year. Maybe some of these guys were good because of Wade Phillips. Like maybe they're just mediocre players who Wade Phillips made into very good players. So it'll be interesting to see who takes a step back this year. The Corey Littleton loss is huge. So their defense has been great the past couple of years. They still have some great players like Donald and Ramsey, but I'm not convinced they're going to be great anymore. I think they're going to be probably like an average defense, and their defense needed to be great because of Jared Goff, who was kind of like exposed. I feel like, I remember a couple of years ago when I kind of opined that Carson Wentz was better than Jared Goff, and people called me crazy. They're like, Jared Goff's playing the Super Bowl. I'm like, yeah, but I mean, he has such a great offensive line blocking for him. He has a great roster, a great coaching staff. Jared Goff has lost people over the years. Like, he lost Matt LaFleur, he lost Greg Olson in his coaching staff. Then he lost his offensive lineman. They lost the starting center. They lost Roger Saffold. Andrew Whitworth's getting older. He's still a good left tackle, but he's not the same great player he once was. Havenstein, like you said, kind of regressed last year. Probably rebounds, but we'll see. But their offensive line is bad. Like, one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL, unless some of the young guys take a big step forward, which, they struggled last year, except for David Edwards was okay. But I think overall, this team is just not very good. They have some superstars, like the two defensive players, Donald and Ramsey. Robert Woods, a very good receiver. Cooper Kupp's good receiver too. Tyler Higbee was a monster at the end of last year. So they definitely have some stars in their team, but they kind of remind me of like a fancy looking car with no engine. Like, I think that's how I would describe the Rams, and I think they go like 5-11 or something like that this year.
Yeah, I could see that being where they finish. I think they have a pretty low floor overall, and I don't think their ceiling's all that high. I think they may get to 8-8, but I don't see them having a winning record, which is why both you and I love their under 8.5 win total. I believe we discussed a couple weeks ago. My big question this year is, if the Rams don't fare well, I wonder what will become of Sean McVay. I don't think that they're going to move on from him or anything, because, I mean, he was just in the Super Bowl recently, but I wonder if they'll start to put pressure on him because, he's brought in pretty much a whole new staff with Kevin O'Connell, Brandon Staley, and John Bonamego joining his ranks and replacing some other assistants. So I don't know if they're going to say like, hey, you got to get it together, or we might have to make a change, or if they're going to value him. But either way, McVay's lost a little bit of his luster unless he can really make this team exceed expectations this year, at least in my opinion.
Well, I agree. I think, people won't see it this way, but I think that, if they go 5-11, 6-10, if they had a mediocre head coach, I think they go 3-13. I like McVay a lot. I think he's one of the best coaches in the NFL. But you're right. They lost some assistants, which is huge. They lost personnel. McVay, yet, despite this, he had them being competitive last year. But now they're worse. So I think 5-11, maybe they go 6-10, 7-9 because of McVay. Maybe he just carries them there. Plus, maybe Aaron Donald has like this amazing season where we talked about last week. Like, what if he breaks the sack record and he gets like 25 sacks or something absurd? Yeah, the Rams will be competitive in some of their games, but I don't see them making the playoffs. All right, let's talk about the odds to win the division. So 49ers are plus 110 as the favorites, so not a minus here. The Seahawks are plus 290. The Rams are plus 475, and the Cardinals are plus 500. Does anything stand out there?
I would say the Cardinals coming in last stands out to me just because I think that there's a chance that they could make the playoffs. I don't think they're going to compete for the division, though. So I wouldn't bet that. I like the Seahawks at you said plus 290. I think that they have just as good a chance to win the division as the 49ers. And it really came down to the wire in the division race last year, if I remember correctly, too. And I think the 49ers are a little bit worse for wear now, whereas the Seahawks are getting healthier. So I would be tempted to bet the Seahawks plus 290 here, because I think that there's at least a chance that they could win the division.
Yeah, I think plus 290 is fine. I think that's a decent number. Maybe I'll put like a small bet on it. I think Arizona plus 500 is not crazy either. Like, what if the 49ers have some injuries this year? And they'll take a step back. I know it'll be between Seattle and Arizona, and I think plus 500 is okay. So I wouldn't bet very heavily on either of these, but I think they're worth at least small wagers. So I don't know. I'm going to be in Vegas in about a month from now, like 5 or 6 weeks from now. So maybe I'll if I find a better number than 500, I see like a plus 600, plus 650. I think I'll bet a little bit on it.
Yeah, I think that would be the number that I would be really comfortable with. I think 500 is solid for the Cardinals. I just as it stands, I don't see them winning the division, so I may be a little bit more reluctant to bet on it. But massive thing for the NFL. So all it takes is one to derail a team. It'll be interesting to see if the 49ers can live up to expectations, though, because like you said, they came out of nowhere last year. But now if they have a target on their back, I think it's going to be a lot harder for them to repeat as division champions.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I mean, teams are going to be prepared for them. So I don't see them. I don't see them getting to the Super Bowl, although they could. But I think they take a little step back. I see them making the playoffs. I think 3 teams in the NFC West can make the playoffs, especially with now 3 wild cards. I think that's a very strong possibility.
Yeah, especially where the North and the East look pretty weak overall too.
Yeah, those seem like one team playoff divisions. So, any parting thoughts before we sign off?
I'll give you a little thought on Dalvin Cook's potential holdout. I was already very anti-Dalvin Cook for fantasy purposes. If he's going to hold out, I want as many shares of Alexander Mattison as possible. I drafted him, I think, in the 7th round of our most recent PPR mock draft for fantasy. And I think he may even go earlier now. I wouldn't be afraid, obviously, depending on how the Cook situation plays out. We're not going to know for a couple months, but if we're getting into August and Cook hasn't reported yet, give me Alexander Mattison any day of the week in that 5th round, because he could easily emerge as the starter there. And he has the talent needed to be an effective player and an effective, at least, running back too in fantasy. So I'm going to be drafting him earlier than expected, probably the rest of the offseason, unless something changes with Cook. And Cook is not worth the money he's asking for. He stayed healthy for 1 season. And while it was a great season, running backs are just not worth that investment.
Yeah, he hasn't even played a full year in his career. He's played 14 games. That's the most he's played in a season. So $13 million per year, that's insane. Like, who's going to pay that? That's crazy. So he needs to lower his asking price. If that's his asking price, and if he's that stubborn about it, he's not gonna play this year, at least not the first half of the year. So I think he might be like Melvin Gordon, or he comes back like week 6, week 7, week 8, something like that, and then he plays and he's maybe out of shape, and then he gets hurt again because he's always injury prone anyway. So as soon as that happened, I actually thought of you, because you've been very high on Alexander Mattison, and I kind of like felt bad because you're gonna get the sleeper in all your leagues in the 7th round. And now, if you're drafting late August and Cook still hasn't reported, like, Madison's going to be going in like the 3rd round or 4th round, probably like the 4th round. So your leverage is gone, unfortunately. But I do agree with what you're saying. I like Madison even more now. Dalvin Cook was one of my top busts. So yeah, I'm definitely on board with Madison.
Yeah, and my response to you feeling bad for me, I do appreciate it, but given how terrible the running back depth is this year, I have no qualms about spending a 3rd round pick on Alexander Mattison if I have to. Of course, given that it looks like he's going to be a starter. I mean, I wouldn't do that just to do that, but if he looks good, I will be all over him this year. So Madison I'm officially declaring him my guy for right now. And hopefully I won't have to change that. I have to walk back on those occasionally, especially when there's some Samaje Perine. But, you learn your lesson after a while.
Well, Madison's talented, so I don't think you're going to miss on this one unless Cook comes back and is established as the starter. But yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. Like, if Cook isn't back by close to Labor Day, at Madison, you take him in the 3rd or 4th round. And to your point, like, considering how bad the running back depth is this year, and like it is the worst I've ever seen. I feel like I say this every year, but this is truly the worst running back depth in fantasy I've ever seen. So yeah, Madison, sign me up for Madison in the 3rd or 4th round for sure. So I guess that's it. So if you're watching on YouTube again, please hit subscribe. That would mean a lot. Otherwise, do you have anything to plug?
Yeah, I've got a story up on Rigo's Rag, Washington Redskins site about Ken Zampese, their quarterbacks coach, and the quarterbacks he's developed over his roughly 2 decades in the NFL, just and how that may impact Dwayne Haskins. So feel free to check that out. Follow me on Twitter at Jacob Kamiker if you want to talk some football too. Always down to take questions there or talk about the sport. I'll be tweeting plenty of Redskins and Patriots thoughts too as football draws closer to training camp, which I am very much looking forward to.
Yeah, same here. We need some sports back pronto, for sure. I'm at wallsterfootball.com. Tons of content on the site. We have our season previews going now. Charlie's still posting his Why the Slide. We have Kenny Willekes today, a bunch of other guys on Why the Slide. Charlie's also starting to post his scouting reports. So we have Trevor Lawrence, we have Justin Fields, a couple other guys. I saw Jamie Newman come in, so that'll be up soon. So check that out. Otherwise, I'll talk to you next week, and we'll have to color coordinate for another team in one of the 2 divisions.
Sounds good. I'm all about color coordination, so we'll figure that out.
All right, sounds good. Talk to you later.
All right, later. Bye.